You can't build a peaceful world on empty stomachs and human misery. Norman Borlaug. The year is 1963. The world is still nursing its wounds from the Second World War. A war born not only from politics, but from collapse. An economic freefall that turned nations inward and people against each other. Resources, race, and rage were all acceptable justifications. Norman watched it all unfold. Science, once the promise of progress, had become the blueprint for destruction. Technology designed to advance life now perfected the art of ending it. Equations scorched the earth. If science could destroy, he thought, maybe it could also heal. 2 decades earlier, as a young research scientist with the Rockefeller Foundation, he was sent to solve a wheat crisis Mexico had battled for years. A failure so deep it dragged the economy towards collapse and pushed the nation to the edge of famine. But this wasn't a problem Mexico was facing alone. Many nations were newly independent after colonial rule and were inheriting broken food systems, rapid population growth, outdated farming methods, depleted soils, pests, diseases. The majority of the world was starving. Today, Norman sits in a room at the Indian Agricultural Research Institute in Pusa, New Delhi. He sits in the company of government officials, policy advisors, agricultural scientists, geneticists, and Norman has a choice to make. To express or not to express. The room is buzzing, is filled with doubts, anger, frustration, problems, but no solution. India was facing the same crisis and desperation filled the air. Deep down, Norman believed he could help if given the chance. No, he would commit to it, dedicate himself until eating, something most of us these days take for granted, was no longer a privilege, but a right. But who would believe him? Who would give him that opportunity? What if he failed? In one parallel universe, Norman stays quiet. Surely there are enough brilliant minds in the room to figure it out, he thinks. If he speaks up, they may reject him. Worse still, they might believe in him, and he might fail. And if he fails, his name becomes a cautionary tale, an example. In another universe, he speaks, but carefully. Measured words, softened edges. He offers to give it his best shot with the help of some of the other great minds in the room. A few polite murmurs follow, until one official replies, "We would prefer the solution come from an Indian. For optics, for pride, for the face of the nation." In another, the world never fell apart. No depression, no war. Norman never became a scientist. He followed his dream, became a forest ranger, married, had 2 children, grew old, and died. The meeting in India never happened. The world continues to starve. But in our universe, Norman stands in front of the entire room and he chooses to speak, to express his true thoughts, unfiltered from fear, unadjusted for societal acceptance, unsuppressed in any way. "Give me a place to stand, and I will grow food for the whole world," he implied. So they did. The media rarely celebrates prevention. It doesn't celebrate disasters that never happened. So Norman Borlaug isn't a household name. But he went on to achieve something incredible. Norman didn't fight in a war. He didn't uncover a grand theory of the universe. He crossbred wheat, resilient, high-yielding, rust-resistant wheat, and he sent it to India. Those seeds took root and they grew. First in Punjab, then across the subcontinent. They stabilized harvest, pulled millions back from the brink, and the ripple didn't stop there. The Philippines, Pakistan, Turkey, China, it came to be called the Green Revolution. Most do not even know who he is. Most do not care about his story. But Norman, an American of Norwegian descent, raised on a small farm in Iowa, managed to attach something to his name that nobody else ever has. The common credit of saving more human lives than any other person in history. We tell stories like Norman's with awe, as if greatness arrives like thunder. But what if it doesn't? What if greatness starts as a whisper in the mind, a fragile thought just beneath language? What if, right now, this very second, somewhere out there, someone is carrying an idea that could echo out and change everything? So today, I'm curious, can a single expression really change the world? He sits in a classroom and he thinks. He wonders. He is curious. He stares out the window while the lecture drones on. This doesn't make sense. If this works like that, then why doesn't that work like this? Maybe if it worked like this instead, it could end all future wars. But he is just a college student. Surely the greatest minds in history have had the same thoughts. And so he remains silent, joining the many thinkers that came before him. He is shy, unsure, afraid, unaware. Unaware that he may not be the very person who changes the world, but he may indeed be the one who sparks the mind that will. A person on average experiences around 6,200 distinct thoughts every single day. This is according to Queen's University researchers who tracked so-called thought worms using fMRI to map transitions from one thought to another. They found that a thought is like no other. Each is shaped by a swirl of memory, mood, body chemistry, culture, even breath. Neuroscience shows us that our thoughts are stamped by our unique connectome, the 100 billion neurons wired in ways that differ even from identical twins. Two people might think the same word, but the neural path they took to get to that word is entirely different. So, when you hesitate in class thinking, someone else has probably thought of this already, remember, no one has ever thought it exactly like you have. A thought, the one you chose not to express, might be the missing piece. It doesn't have to be world-changing. Sometimes, a simple thought might contain the very thing that answers a question you even haven't asked yourself. A tip on a forum, a sentence in a podcast, a comment buried on a social media platform. One day, someone stumbles across it and something clicks. The missing piece, the perspective, the overlooked detail that completes the equation. The answer to a question they've carried quietly for years. How many times have you searched the internet for answers? out of need or just out of curiosity. How to bake a cake. You find a recipe, you follow it exactly, you preheat the oven, you measure everything, you check on it carefully, often. But wait, there's a problem. Your cake looks nothing like the image on the recipe. Your cake is flat and dense like a parachute that never caught the wind. You wonder why. So you once again turn to the internet for answers. You turn to the expression and thoughts of others. Why did my cake not rise? And there you have it. A comment made by user IL Baking on an image of a cake that looks as sad as yours. I think every time you open the oven door, you let the heat escape. This might be affecting the dough's ability to rise properly. And so you try again. But this time, you're met with another problem. You repeat this process time and time again, absorbing expression after expression, collecting all of the pieces of the puzzle until finally, at last, your cake is perfect. You've learned how to bake a perfect cake, and once you know something, once there is awareness, you can never unknow or be unaware. Every piece of knowledge acquired is progressive. Expression isn't always the final answer. Sometimes it's just a piece, a fragment, a spark, a fuel that when combined ignites a fire that is impossible to extinguish. Language. It didn't arrive fully formed. It evolved tens of thousands of years ago across early human settlements as a survival tool, a way to warn, to wonder, to express, to pull thoughts out of the void and give it a physical presence. Ever since, we have not stopped expressing, and with it, we decoded the human genome. 3 billion letters of biological code, each one part of the software running every cell of every human being. It was a task far too vast for any single person, but when scientists stopped working in isolation and started to share notes, discoveries, failures, the pieces began to fit. And we mapped the code for life. Expression extends so far beyond just science. In the digital world, developers chose transparency. They made their work open source, invited others to adapt, add, and improve. That's how we got browsers, operating systems, and even artificial intelligence. Not from one mind, but from thousands stitched together across time and geography. Expression is about contributing your part to a growing mosaic. That's how we made medicine, how we built the internet, how we shaped modern culture. Every breakthrough you see, from a vaccine to a software update to men on the moon, is the result of countless acts of expression. Sometimes I wonder, where would we be without it? Well, back to a world before language, because what is language if not the means to express? And today, one of the clearest reflections of that idea is a platform visited over 120 million times a day: YouTube. Creators don't just post content, they express what they've learned, post what works, what doesn't. They teach what they've discovered, experienced, or simply thought. And in that vast ocean of expression, somewhere on a video, encoded in a string of ones and zeros, sitting on a server somewhere in the world, is the next missing piece of someone's puzzle. And that is the reason why I decided to start this channel, to make these videos. I've always been a creative, a wanderer, someone who looked at the world and asked, why? But like many, I got swept into the rhythm of modern life, the endless cycle of earn, spend, consume, a loop so normalized it begins to feel natural. Until one day, I wondered, what does any of it actually mean? This loop we live inside, how does it contribute to anything beyond itself? I'm not saying that it doesn't, I just wondered. How does it contribute to life, to the world, to the long arc of human history, and what is my role in it? Is this the only path? Is this the only reality that exists? But all those thoughts, all that wonder was confined within me. Until today, until I decided to start this channel and hopefully build a community of wanderers like myself. But who am I to speak on anything? I'm not a knower of all things. I'm not an academic. I'm not an expert. I'm not even particularly well informed in the traditional sense. But that's not what this channel is about. I am a form of life, gifted with a rare privilege, the privilege of thought, curiosity, and imagination. That is what this channel is about. To speak on the thoughts that lie beneath the surface, the ones that don't make for easy conversations at parties, the ones that challenge comfort, question normality, and sit in that strange space between knowing and not knowing. To provoke curiosity and encourage others not just in what to think, but in how to think. I, like you, am nothing more than a finite being, a flicker of awareness drifting through space and time, an infinitely small speck of dust living out an entire lifetime on a slightly larger speck suspended in a vast cosmos. One day, I will die. You will die. Everyone alive at this very moment will return to the basic elements from which they once formed. Our lives may be a blip in time, our lifetimes reduced to a name on stone. But the expressions we leave behind, the ideas we scribble down, every thought we pluck from our minds and materialize, can echo through generations. A ripple originating from the minds of those who heard, read, or witnessed them. It's too easy to get lost in the noise of life, to feel so entangled in survival that expression begins to feel optional. I have so many stories to tell and have always wanted to write a book, but between work and the kids, I barely have time to think. I disagree with the way things are and I've always wanted to speak the truth, but I'm scared I'm the only one who sees it. I see the world in colors and I've always wanted to paint them, but I've just bought a house and paintings won't pay my mortgage. And so we continue to wait for the perfect time, the right mood, the moment when life slows down and finally lets us speak. But that moment rarely comes, and our expression, our finite moment in a possibly infinite timeline passes by like a match struck in a storm, fading into darkness, like you were never here. For all the rules placed upon us, all the boundaries we're born into, expression is one of the few freedoms that still belongs to us. It can't be outlawed by authority. It can't be restrained by time. And it is something we owe to future generations. We owe it to them to tell our story, to provide our perspective, to speak so that someone someday might understand what it meant to be alive at this very moment in history and wonder. The expectation is not to change the world, but just like Norman Borlaug, using our expression, maybe all we have to do is plant a seed.